Hi, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Today, I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in January. I read 5 books? I read 5 books in January. I mean, technically, I guess I read 4. Whatever. I'm going to count one of them as being something I read in January because I finished it in January. I don't know. Whatever. Okay. I usually organize my wrap-ups in the order that I read the books, but I'm not going to do that this time because there are 3 books that I want to talk about together, like in one thing. So this isn't really in any like particular order. I'm just kind of going for it, you know? Just going for it. So the first book I read in January don't really count necessarily as me reading it in January because I finished it on January 1st. I started it like well before January, so I didn't really read it in January, but I did finish it in January, and it is The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice. This is the second book in the Vampire Chronicles series, or like the Interview with the Vampire, that series. Yeah, I started this book in like, I don't even know. I was reading this for like at least 2 months, and I finally finished it January 1st. And it wasn't entirely the book's fault that it took me that long to finish. It was predominantly my fault. I'm not going to go too much into detail about my thoughts because I already did in another video that I uploaded at the beginning of January, so just to avoid being like redundant, I'm not going to go too in depth about my thoughts, but overall I really loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I gave it 5 stars. But even though it took me so long to read, like I said, it wasn't necessarily the book's fault. It was predominantly my fault. I needed a break from vampires, and I pushed myself to read a long book about vampires, which is not exactly what I wanted to read in that moment, and I knew that even though I was liking the book, like even though I was enjoying the book, I knew that it wasn't what I was in the mood to read, but I just kept forcing myself to read it, but I still enjoyed it. Like I said, I gave it 5 stars. Don't know when I'm going to continue with the rest of the series because I mentioned in the other video that I talked more about this book that I'm giving myself like a break from vampires because I think I need one. I love vampires. I will always love vampires. We all know this. But I need a little break from it. You know, that's it. So I don't know when I'm going to read the 3rd book in the series, The Queen of the Damned, but hopefully somewhat soon. I don't know. But yeah, that was The Vampire Lestat. So the next book I read in January was Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour. This is a January pick for the 20-something book club, which is hosted by Mafalda from Mafalda's Reading and Casey from Casey Can Read. I'll put a link in the description to like all the information about the book club if you want to check it out. But yes, this was the January pick. I had never read anything else by Nina LaCour prior to this book, and I heard that she's really good at writing books that make you feel something. Good at writing those emotional stories. And this is one of them. This is an emotional story. This book is about a girl who ages out of a foster care system, and she applies for an internship at kind of like a foster farm. It's a farm where they take in foster kids. So yes, she applies for an internship there and gets accepted for it. And on the farm, it's like the farm is owned by a couple, and they like take in foster kids and they have them do like chores and like work around the farm. And then they also hire like kids who are like 18, 19 who have recently aged out of the foster care system to be interns on the farm to also do work around the farm as well as teach the kids, like essentially be like their school teachers. And throughout the book, while she's working on the farm, she's also learning to face her childhood trauma and her experiences during her upbringing and kind of just facing her past. And everything about this farm is relatively normal except there's ghosts. There's ghosts on the farm. That's just something about the farm. A fun fact about the farm. There's ghosts on it. That's basically the whole premise of this book. If you really like the found family element and trope within books, you'll probably really like this. I have not read a lot of found family stuff, so I don't really have a preference on how I like it to be done, I guess, in writing and in books. However, I don't think I was the biggest fan of it in this book, just because there are some things that happen in the book with characters that are supposed to be a part of this like found family that were kind of sketch, and I was like, well, I don't like that. you know? And there were some, like, dynamics of the characters that I felt were a little strange. Not strange to the point where it was, like, weird or wrong, but strange in the sense that I felt like it didn't make sense. Like, it just could have been developed better, in my opinion. I think the dynamic and the relationship between certain characters, it felt like I was supposed to feel one way about it, but I wasn't feeling that way about it. And because there was just something missing there, and it just felt kind of off. But then again, I don't read a lot of found family stuff. I'm not very familiar with found family as, like, a thing. I'm not very familiar with the trope in books, so I don't really have any example of found family in any book that I'm like, yep, this is how I like this trope done, I guess. But I know that I wasn't the biggest fan of this one. Overall, I thought the book was fine. I thought it was going to be a little bit more emotional. I mean, it was very emotional, but I expected there to be more of, like, an emotional punch at the end, and we just, like, didn't get that. So that was a little bit disappointing for me. Everything else I thought was okay. This whole book kind of felt like a fever dream because the whole book, it goes back and forth from, like, her life on the farm, like, present time, to, like, her having, like, these memory flashbacks of, like, her past and her childhood and, like, the things she experienced. So it's kind of, like, all over the place. But this is also a really good book for, like, reading in one sitting, honestly. Like, you have your books that are, like, normal and you're just like, okay, I need to take a break. Oh, I'm gonna read for this amount of time, and then if you read for a certain amount of time, you're like, okay, I'm gonna take a break. But then you also have the books where they're just so good and you just cannot put it down. This is, like, in between those two books, if that makes sense. Like, it's not so good to the point where I can't put it down. Like, I definitely could put it down. But I also could just keep reading it and be fine. Like, I could have read this in one sitting if I really wanted to, because it was just so easy to keep reading because it felt like a fever dream. Honestly, like, it just kept going and going and going. Like, it didn't feel like there was any point where there was nothing really happening or nothing really to expect in the story. So it was just kind of, oh, let me just keep fucking reading. You know, like, I feel at least that it's so easy to read this in one sitting. Like I said, overall I thought it was okay. I was expecting a little bit more from it, but yeah, I gave it 3 stars. So the next 3 books that I read in January that I'm talking about were a surprise for me. Didn't think that I'd be reading these books, but I did. It was the first 3 books in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas. A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, and A Court of Wings and Ruin. I've said this before in, like, a reading blog, I think, but if someone had asked me a month ago if I thought that I was gonna like these books, my answer would have been no. But that answer is now different. This series has taken over my life. I didn't expect to not like this series because I thought it was going to be bad, but I expected to just feel, like, very underwhelmed and, like, really, like, kind of lukewarm about the series and not care to continue it, because that's what usually happens to me with series. I have started so many other book series and read the first book and didn't feel like I cared enough to continue it. I haven't read and, like, continued a series past book 1 in years. I don't even know how many other series I've read. I've read Vicious, The Raven Boys, Darker Shade of Magic, whatever the fuck else, Shadow and Bone. Like, nothing I cared enough to continue. And then these books are the ones that make me want to continue. Like, I added the rest of the series to my TBR when I was halfway through the first book. Like, I didn't even need to finish the first book, and I was like, yep, this series is a part of my life. This is just who I am now. But I do have quite a lot of thoughts on these books. So there's a lot to unpack, okay? There's a lot to unpack here. Also, I would like to mention that when I started these books, I was under the impression that they were young adult. Like, I thought these were YA books. And I'm like halfway through the book and I'm like, what the fuck? What kind of YA book is this? Like, what is this? And then I look it up and I learned that they're technically new adult. Not young adult, new adult, which makes, like, 1,000 times more sense. So that was something that I was surprised by. I thought these were young adult books for the longest time, and they're apparently not. So, since everybody and their fucking dog on BookTube has read these books already, I'm gonna refrain from explaining a really thorough synopsis of A Court of Thorns and Roses, the first book in the series, but just for the sake of like doing the thing, I'll give a very brief one. So, A Court of Thorns and Roses is supposed to be like a Beauty and the Beast retelling with fairies. And so we got like our main character Feyre. One day she accidentally kills a fairy, and consequently she is forced to live in like the mansion of this fairy high lord in the fairy land. That was probably the best synopsis that I've ever given and heard in my life. Like, that was just so good. Spark Notes, if you're watching, that was my job application. Do with that what you will. Anyway, moving on from that fantastic synopsis. So I gave the first book 4 stars. It was honestly like a 3-star about for the first half, and then when I got to the second half, it became a 4-star just because, I don't know, I started enjoying it a little bit more. Here's the thing, I don't have any rhyme or reason or like rules to the way that I rate books. I know that there's a lot of people that have like a whole system of how they rate their books. I don't do that. I just kind of read and then like feel the vibes and then rate according to them. So that's just what I do. And so if I had rated this book according to the writing and like technical things about like making a novel, I would have rated it lower. I probably would have rated it like 2 stars, maybe 2.5. Dare I say 2.75, maybe, but not 4. Not 4. I didn't think the writing was horrible. I didn't think it was horrible. I thought it was honestly fine. There were a lot of things about the writing that honestly bothered me that I really didn't like, but I was able to look past them super easily just because I was really enjoying the story. Like, I really enjoyed the story and everything, like the characters and the romance and all of that. So that made it really easy to look past these little things in the writing that I just didn't fucking like. My ratings on these books are purely from how much I enjoyed it. They represent how much fun I had reading the book, not from a critical point of view. Not from an analytical point of view. I don't give a fuck. I read these books for fun, and that's what matters. One of the main things that I really didn't like about the writing, and that goes for all of the books, there's a lot of telling, not showing. It's just a lot of long dialogue and like explanation of backstory when it definitely could have been revealed throughout the story through like events that happened. But yeah, there's a lot of telling, not showing, and that was a little annoying, but it wasn't that big of a deal. But I was like, okay, we get it. Thank you. This character is going to go on this whole spiel now about their upbringing when I don't need it. But that's okay. That was probably the main thing that I didn't like about the writing. The dialogue sometimes is a little cringy. I wasn't a fan of some of the cringy dialogue, but again, I was able to look past it and just ignore it and accept it for what it was because it had so much fun. And it was fine. Like, all of these things that I'm saying that I didn't like affected my rating in no way. But it just didn't matter. It's just things that I want to talk about, I guess. Also, I feel like these books are talked about as like super smutty, and they're not though. Like, they're not like super smutty. There are sexually explicit scenes, but the whole book isn't like smut. There's like a few sex scenes, but that's it. It's not like a whole smutty book. There are some smutty scenes, but it's not like the entire book, and I feel like that's what a lot of people expect, that there's like a fuck ton of smut in these books, and it's just not. There's just not, It's sprinkled. It's sprinkled here and there. And there were just other little things within the writing that I thought were just a little cringy and like not necessary. Like, anytime a character was supposed to be like flipping off another character, at least that's what I would assume they were supposed to be doing. Like, instead of it saying that they did that, it was like, oh, she gave him a vulgar gesture. Like, what? Which one? Like, I think there's like a few that she could have done, but which one? Like, I'm assuming she meant like flipping them off, but like, how many vulgar gestures are there? Like, when I'm talking about this specifically, the vulgar gesture thing, oh my god, it was like so often throughout all of these books. Like, at least over like 20-30 times throughout the span of all 3 of these books that I have to read. She gave him a vulgar gesture. He gave her a vulgar gesture. Why? Like, that just, I don't know. That didn't sit right with me. Wasn't my favorite thing. Also, the snarling and the growling. There's a lot of snarling, just casual snarling. Like, if someone's mad, it's like, she snarled and bared her teeth. I'm like, how'd she do that? She's just like, grr. Like, what is she doing? Like, is that just like normal? Like, I don't know. I don't know. Those are the main points that I wanted to mention about the writing and the things that I particularly didn't enjoy within the writing. But yes, again, don't care though. At the end of the day, don't care. These books are fun and I like them. I'm going to briefly talk about A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Wings and Ruin just because they're like sequels, so there's not too much that I can say about them. But I gave A Court of Mist and Fury 5 stars. The best in the series. Best in the series. Everybody says it. Everybody knows it. It's the best in the series. It was fantastic. So much fun. Perfect escapism. That's what these books are. Just complete escapism, and it's great. It's wonderful. A Court of Wings and Ruin, I gave 3.5 stars. It was definitely my least favorite out of the 3. It kind of felt like filler. Like, a lot of the things that happened in the book felt like filler and just a little bit unnecessary. I still enjoyed it and still had fun with it, but it was my least favorite out of the series. There's one particular line in A Court of Wings and Ruin, though, that I wanted to talk about here because I didn't like it. This line really stuck out to me. I don't know the exact page number because I read them on the Kindle app on my iPad, so I'm just gonna say the line. And the line is, his teeth shone white as bone. Like, that's kind of like saying the sun shone as bright as a star. You know what I mean? It's just a little like, well, yeah. Yeah. You're right. It did. It did that. She did that. Miss Mass did that. So those were all the books that I read in January. Wasn't expecting to enjoy A Court of Thorns and Roses as much as I did, but here we are. And I am now a Court of Thorns and Roses stan. So let me know what you read in January. Let me know if you read any of these books. I'd love to know. But that concludes today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye!